From Lagos, the nation's commercial capital, this is the News at 10. Live from Channels Television. Reporting tonight, Ijoma Unyato.
Hello and welcome. Confirmed COVID-19 cases in Nigeria rise to 184, with NCDC announcing 10 more cases today as 11 more patients are discharged from the infectious disease hospital in Lagos. Federal government seeks support of indigenous manufacturers in the production and supply of critical equipment needed to effectively tackle COVID-19 in the country. President Buhari directs payment of workers' salaries as he receives committee's briefing on the economic impact of COVID-19, insists on protection of poor and vulnerable. And global confirmed COVID-19 cases hit over 1 million as Spain's death toll climbs to over 10,000 and that of the US exceeds 5,000. Plus, we'll have business, sports, news from Abuja, the FCT, and later on international news from our London studios.
On business news tonight, oil prices jump more than 20% as Saudi Arabia and Russia reach agreement on production cuts.
On sports news tonight, the British Parliament threatens Premier League football clubs with a windfall tax if they do not cut players' wages.
And from Abuja, Inspector General of Police warns officers and men enforcing the lockdown and restriction orders across the country to respect rights of Nigerians.
Ten new confirmed cases. That's the latest figure from the Nigeria Center for Disease Control today. 7 of the 10 new cases are in Lagos and the other 3 in the nation's capital, Abuja. With the latest addition, Nigeria now has a total of 184 confirmed cases of COVID-19, with 20 persons discharged and 2 deaths recorded. A state-by-state breakdown of the cases shows that Lagos now has 98 cases, the FCT Abuja 38, Osun with 14, Oyo has 8 cases, Akwa Ibom 5, 4 each in Edo, Ogun and Kaduna states, and Bauchi has 3 cases. Ekiti and Enugu each have 2 cases, while Rivers and Benue states have recorded 1 case each. But there's some good news in Nigeria's fight against the spread of the virus as 11 more COVID-19 patients were discharged from the infectious disease hospital in Lagos today. This brings the total number of released COVID-19 patients in Nigeria to 20. The Lagos State Governor, Babajide Sanwo-Olu, announced this on his Twitter handle today, stating that all the patients have fully recovered, all tested negative to the virus, and have been released to join their families. The governor explains that 2 of the patients are female and the other 9 are male. According to him, their results came out negative after 2 rounds of tests. The governor commends health workers and other professionals on the front line, adding that it's not yet time to relax, but to maintain vigilance. He's confident that in the end, Nigeria will come out victorious. And the Presidential Task Force on COVID-19 continued its briefing on efforts to contain the spread of the virus in the country today. The Minister of Health, Dr. Ortega, says the federal government would need the support of indigenous manufacturers to produce and supply some critical equipment, such as face masks, gloves and ventilators that are needed to effectively manage the spread of the virus. He explains that contact tracing is still ongoing as he raises concerns there might be more cases in the days ahead. That formed part of conversations at the briefing today.
The national briefing.
It's day 4 of the daily briefing by members of the Presidential Task Force on COVID-19 in Abuja.
Thank you.
Speaking against the backdrop of recent increase in the numbers of confirmed cases in the country, the Secretary to the Government of the Federation appeals to all state governments to build isolation and treatment centres capable of admitting at least 300 patients.
As we continue to assess the readiness for containment and management, we recognize strongly the importance of synergy with the states. In furtherance of this consultation, we are requesting that the subnational governments should provide at least a 300-bed facility, either a hotel or other facilities that are available to them, with options and graded in different categories.
The numbers of confirmed cases of COVID-19 in the country has been on the rise in the last few days, a situation that is already having its toll on its resources.
We currently have 15 rapid response teams supporting 15 states. It's the largest deployment of public health resources for an outbreak ever in our country. Unlike other outbreaks that are localized, even the Ebola outbreak was still Lagos and Port Harcourt. This time, every day we add a new state. Every single day we have to deploy a new team. It requires resources, people, logistics, efforts.
In view of the prevailing global shortages of particular commodities like masks and protective gowns and even of ventilators, we are going to have conversations with the Ministry of Industry, Trade and Investment to look for indigenous producers, indigenous manufacturers to try and support the effort to find more facilities and commodities that we are going to be using for protection and personal protection equipment.
The cases that are reported.
Fielding answers to questions from Channels TV correspondent about border closure, the Minister of Interior explains why some Nigerian returnees from Abidjan who later tested positive for COVID-19 were allowed into the country.
In compliance with international treaty and law, we cannot deny our citizens entry to our nation. If you do that, it will be embarrassing and it will not speak well of our nation. But appropriate guideline, I must not fail to add this, appropriate guideline will be issued by the PTF on the modalities of having returnees here, not just keeping them in isolation for a period of time, which will be 14 days. They might have to be responsible for some few things that will have to accompany it.
Already, 15 states plus the Federal Capital Territory have reported confirmed cases of COVID-19. This is the reason why the Presidential Task Force is calling for a stronger collaboration with the states to flatten the curve of the virus.
And there's a bit more cheery news as the Chief Medical Director of the University College Hospital, Ibadan, Professor Abiodun Ortega has tested negative for COVID-19 days after testing positive. Professor Ortega had on Sunday said in a statement that he tested positive and admonished all those who had contact with him to go on self-isolation. However, his samples were taken again on Tuesday, March the 31st, for another round of screening, and the result came out negative today. Now, as the federal government looks for ways to insulate the nation's economy from the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, President Muhammadu Buhari has directed that all salaries should be paid. The president's directive came after he received a briefing from the committee set up to assess the impact of the pandemic on the economy. He also wants protection for critical infrastructure with measures in place to shield the poor and the vulnerable.
It's a two-pronged battle. Fight to halt the virus and to protect the economy. The world is faced with falling prices of crude oil. The implication is that the largest economy in Africa is hard hit. The President's committee to assess how much the pandemic is eating into the country's finances is at the Villa with an update.
As you know, the crude oil price in the global market has gone much lower than the $30 per barrel that we had earlier on anticipated. So it means for us a further review on on the measures that we need to take. So basically, it's just giving an update of where we are and what we need to do.
In spite of the obvious cash crunch, the president gave these marching orders.
His directive is make sure salaries are paid, make sure critical infrastructure projects like roads, rails are protected. As much as possible, use local inputs so that we retain value within our economy, and also make sure that you have measures that protect the poor and the vulnerable.
Meanwhile, Mrs. Ahmed and Hatim are members of the Economic Sustainability Committee, chaired by Vice President Professor Yemi Osinbajo. The VP's first task is to inaugurate the committee.
I'd like to just welcome you and say, without further ado, that we consider ourselves inaugurated and ready to go to work.
Before the meeting went into a closed session, Professor Osinbajo speaks on what's ahead.
Revenues have fallen precipitously. Of course, also domestic revenues have also fallen. So we're at a very critical and uncertain time in our economic history, and even in our history as a nation.
There are no immediate comments on the outcome of the committee's meeting. From the presidential villa in Abuja, Ibrahim Adra, Channels Television News.
The Minister of Police Affairs, Mr. Maigari Dingyadi, is asking residents of the nation's capital, Abuja, those in Lagos and Ogun states, to comply with the order on the restriction of movement to stop the spread of COVID-19. Mr. Dingyadi explains that the order is for the good of all residents.
Empty streets everywhere as the nation's capital, Abuja, is turned into a shadow of itself due to the presidential order restricting movement of people. As residents comply with the order, the Minister of Police Affairs takes a tour of the city to see the level of compliance. After visiting policemen enforcing the order, the minister appeals to residents to fully comply with the order to curtail the spread of COVID-19.
People should be able to appreciate what the federal government is doing. Mr. President has made it very clear. We are aware of the pains, but people should also understand that we need to comply with these restriction orders. Otherwise, this virus will continue to spread, and it's going to be a serious problem for all Nigerians. And that is why the federal government has set in this system of logging most of the important places to ensure that people don't go around to mix with others, so that the movement and the spread of the virus is to some most extent controlled.
With complaints of police brutality on residents, the minister denies such allegations, just as the Commissioner of Police vows to deal with cases of human rights violation whenever they arise.
Policemen are never brutal, and if there is any case of brutality, please let us know. We'll make sure that we deal with it accordingly. We have procedures, we have systems that try to make sure that people are dealt with whenever they do things that are wrong. But to the best of our understanding, what is so far happening is nowhere close to what you are talking about.
So far none, but I assure you, if there are complaints, we'll investigate thoroughly and ensure justice is done.
The federal government had on the 29th of March 2020 imposed a 14-day restriction order on residents of the Federal Capital Territory, Lagos and Ogun states as part of measures to curtail the spread of COVID-19.
In part 2, after the break, we have more updates on the restriction of movement order and the Assistant Inspector General of Police Operations, Austin Agbonlaho, to assess the situation in parts of the country. That's in a moment. Please stay with us.